Kia ora team, Noel Willoff here, host of the Beyond the Surface podcast. Thanks so much for tuning into today's episode. But before we get started, I've noticed that over 93% of you watching on YouTube do not subscribe. So if you are enjoying the content and these conversations, please make sure you go hit subscribe on the button below. Also, before we get started, please go check out our official sponsor of the podcast, Moana Road. They've got a whole range of awesome products available at the website. So go check them out in the link in the description below to help us reach more of the guests on that you love. Bret, welcome to the podcast.
I know. Thanks for having me.
All
Great
good
to be here.
So stoked to have you on the show, and shout out Nina for making this possible. There's so much for us to sort of get into, but I thought we'd probably like start at the start, which is quite cool. You grew up in the household of lots of creativity. Your mum was a dancer, and your dad a lawyer, and also starred in was it King Kong?
Yeah, Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings.
Yes, I had. Yes, I'm not sure where you're going, but yes, I had a pretty curious household to grow up in. Yeah.
What do you think? What sort of influence do you think your parents had on your creativity growing up?
Massive. I mean, yeah. So, like you say, my mum was a dance teacher. She ran a contemporary dance company called Footnote, which a lot of people would know. They went around schools in New Zealand doing dance education, contemporary dance, and so our house was always full of. We also had people staying who were dancers from overseas and traveling and choreographers. Mm-hmm. So the house was really full of the arts, and in the evenings we would often be at theatres. Me and my brothers were ushering and, backstage just hanging out or at the dance studio waiting. Or I actually did a lot of dance lessons because it was cheap babysitting for my mum.
Yeah, nice.
And so I was really into ballet till I was about 14, which as a guy in the 1980s and 90s was little like, I think now it's probably, well, even now not that many guys do ballet when they're kids, but anyway, it was pretty random, but I really loved it. I think when I was 12 I thought I was going to be a ballet dancer when I grew up, but I didn't really I was quite, I don't know if I'm pretty skinny, and so I wasn't really much use for lifting other people and dancing. Anyways, so yeah, the household very artsy, and my dad actually didn't live in the house. They were separate. He lived on a farm about an hour north near Levin, horse training horses. Mm-hmm. He was more absent really, but very supportive of the arts. So basically, in the big picture, I had no parent telling me I really need to get a real job, and they couldn't really tell me to get a real job because one of them was a dancer and one of them was a horse, lifetime. Didn't gamble on the races but gambled with his whole career trying to breed a racehorse. And so, yeah, it was very pro arts, and a lot of people I met, they made a choice to go. If you work in the arts, you work in music or TV and film or theatre. There are some people who come from a family where that is not a thing, and they discover it, and they're like, "Oh, this is my thing. I love singing." But my mum's a scientist, and my dad, is a butcher and whatever. I don't know. and they find this way, and then they do something completely different. For me, that was not my path. For me, it was completely normal to be doing shows, and I was doing a lot of theatre as a 20-year-old, after school, after I finished school. And for me, that was just so normal. It was actually weirder for me to think about. To me, the curious path was like, how do people get a real job? And I would sit there reading the paper, the job ads, be like, whoa, what is that? How do you do that? How could I do that? And then, because that just seemed absolutely impossible to me. So maybe,
That's super interesting. I love the point that you mentioned. I think it was also when you won the Oscar, was like, shout out to my parents for not telling me to get a real job. And it's like, what even is a real job nowadays, right?
That's right. Well, since then, so many people work from home now and are contractors, and their job life is very fluid. Yeah. At in the 80s, there were a lot more consistent jobs, and the arts jobs were quite unusual. So it was a different time. Yeah.
I'm always really fascinated by people who discover a niche that didn't really exist, or there wasn't that much exposure for a particular industry that they end up moving into. And I feel like what you've achieved through, your work, and especially around Fly the Conchords, around the early days, around, music comedy, that probably wasn't something which was a clear, defined career path. So
Definitely not.
no. So
What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a musical comedian.
Yeah, that you got no career counselor ever saying that to any young person, right?
That's right. I think it's very hard, especially in the arts, to career counsel. Do you know what I mean? You've got to find something that you like and that you love and that you're good at. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't really, you can't be like, oh, I'm going to follow the path of that actor or that movie person, or because they probably got there in a weird way anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's very lucky. I mean, if I jump back into that, like that's my chair squeaking. If you wonder if that's not my skeleton.
We're on a budget.
Yeah, so the like you say, it was Conchords. There was a lot of stand-up comedy going on, and there was a lot of sketch comedy, and then we didn't even really, Jemaine and I, we started working together when we were at university, and we didn't plan on being a comedy band. We genuinely wanted to be a band, but we were just inherently ridiculous. And our first gig was at a comedy club, but we were the opening act to kind of like warm the crowd up.
Yeah.
And it was at a fringe festival. It's actually a Wellington fringe festival, which is such a cool thing, and lots of weird shows and late clubs where people do, you just try something out. And so we, I don't know if I'm answering the question. I'm just sort of
that's good.
Is that all right? Just rambling into this. So we did our gig, and we had this great flat. We lived in this flat in Mount Vic, which had about 6 people, and we would practice our guitars during the day, and we'd test our songs on our flatmates. And we literally, even to this day, we just are so useless at remembering other people's songs, right? And we only knew a few chords on guitar. I played piano and stuff, but my guitar skills are pretty minimal. It's like E, G, A, and D.
Yeah.
And then, so we started writing songs, and our first song was Fudu Fafa, which is this French song.
Fudu Fafa.
Yeah, Fudu Fafa. And it's basically just A to D. The whole song is A to D the whole time. And so it's 2 chords. And we had a Cassia tone. And then our friend Toby Lang, who's was around the same group, he was in Fat Freddy's Drop. He's in Fat Freddy's Drop now. He came along and played the trumpet for our French Jazz Fringe Festival first gig. And it was just a funny, weird song. But we were more inspired by artists like Beck. Jemaine really liked Weezer, Leonard Cohen, and lots of songwriters that were funny and weird. There's a song by Beck called Deborah. I wanna get you. I met you, J.C. Penney.
Yeah.
He meets this woman at a supermarket, and he falls in love with her. As I stepped to you with a fresh pack of gum, somehow I knew you were looking for some. And it's a really funny song, and it was that kind of zone that we really connected with, and that's what we liked. And then we started performing at these comedy clubs, and the songs just got funnier. That became the pathway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So your first ever show or gig with Jemaine, opening at that comedy night, were you guys playing Fudu Fafa? Were you playing an original, or was it more like covers?
Yeah, no, always originals, because we literally couldn't play other people's songs. Because I think I'm pretty sure Fudu Fafa was that was the Fringe Festival first gig, and it was just us speaking bad French and then going Fudu Fafa, Fudu Fafa fa.
Yeah, baguette.
That's it. It was it was a very simple version of that song.
Yeah.
And then later on we added the complicated bridge.
Yeah.
So and people, it was it was like midnight. We were on. There was a weird act. We came on, and it was really fun, and we got a great response. And then, that audience response, is very encouraging.
Yeah. And do you feel like you guys just continue to build off that momentum over time?
Yeah, absolutely. Because then we did a gig a couple of weeks later, and then we did a week. We did a gig. I mean, not did a week. Did a gig each week at the comedy. There used to be a comedy night in Wellington on Thursday nights at what's the San Fran Bathhouse now.
Okay.
It used to be called Indigo.
Yeah.
and that had a Thursday night comedy gig, and all the local comedians, everyone would do 10 minutes, and we became a regular at that show, and there'd be 15 people in the audience, and 5 of them were really into us. And their enthusiasm was literally what kept us going.
I also read something that because at the time your like guitar skills probably weren't what they are now. So one of you would have to, especially learning how to sing and play guitar at the same time. So one person would hold down, the sort of chord progression, where the other person would sing, and you just sort of swap that over.
Absolutely. I mean, it's still the case. If you would look closely when we play live, the one who's doing the talking or singing is playing less guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very hard to play guitar and sing, especially if it's got a sort of spoken, improvised element to it. Do you see what I mean? If the melody is very set, like a chorus, we often get that to work.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the balance. Often I'd end up playing a bit more guitar so that Jemaine could talk, because I was a little bit better at guitar.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
I think what's really interesting as well about your story and sort of forming that first connection with Jemaine and also Taika is, I believe you guys met at like a drama club through Victoria University. And I don't know if you've read that or heard of that book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell.
I know Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point. Yeah.
This is another book he's done focusing in on like the outliers of the world. So those people that have found, the peaks of success. Think of like Bill Gates, the Beatles.
Yeah.
And he
heard of them.
Yeah. Pretty well known.
Pretty successful.
Yeah. Someone would call them an outlier. But he really dives into their story to articulate like how they got to where they are, and usually it's a combination of like a lot of obviously hard work and talent, but also a lot of luck. But I just want to know, because yourself, like Jemaine, Taika, yourself, you guys have reached the absolute pinnacle of the sort of creative and musical world globally. If you were to go back to yourselves at that drama club and tell you, Bret, in your early 20s, and Jemaine and Taika, what would unfold in the next 10 to 20 to 30 years?
Yeah, we would never have believed it, because everyone was, what I was trying to say is, I don't think we were the best people in the group. Like, we were funny and we were a bit loose and unreliable, but there were some other people who were very talented. Yeah, incredibly lucky. I think like that drama club, it was called Victoria University. I went there after school. I went to Vic University, and what's interesting is I took my kids. I'm like, oh, you're going to go to university, and I dropped out of university, so they're always hassling me about dropping out, and I always threaten that I'm going to go back when they go, and I'll be at university with them to finish a degree. But the best thing that came out of university for me was meeting these people. I met so many cool people who like Jemaine and Taika, and there's lots of great Duncan Sakis, Joe Randerson. There was this whole crew of amazing Wellington arts people who I've carried on working with over years, and that was just the best thing about it. It's kind of incredible when I look back at those people and who we met. We did the show that Duncan Sakis directed, and that was where me and Jemaine and Taika were just thrown into a group together by, they had 30 people, 30 actors or something, or 25 actors, and we were put in groups of 5, and we happened to be put into a group of 5 together.
Crazy.
To make a piece about, we were 5 guys got put into a group together to make a sketch about being a man and male body consciousness, and completely random, right? But by being thrown together, we did the show, and that little piece of the show was successful. I'll tell you the story about it. It was kind of fun. We had to wear, it was a cool idea. Duncan had this idea for costumes. So we were in skin-coloured lycra,
nice.
Not lycra, skin-coloured bike shorts, and then nothing else. So we looked like we were naked. And then we had these little bits, those troll pencils that have the little hair that frizzes out, that little thing. That sort of weird frizzy material was like pubic hairs stuck on, and then there was a Velcro bit, and you could put your penis on and take it off. There's like a Velcro.
Was it like a strap-on sort of thing?
Well, like a Velcro detachable penis that you could just add a little bit of hilarious costumes.
Where'd you even find those?
Yeah, they got made, I think. Yeah. Yeah. And so then we looked like we were naked, and the show was all about being a man. I'm like, oh my God, what does this feel like? And Jemaine wrote this funny bit about going to the urinal, and there's like urinal etiquette, and we did the sketch, and we had a little song, and anyways, that was a very strange show, and but that little piece, our 5-minute piece, was really successful in the show. It was a group show, and then we turned that into a 45-minute show and expanded on, did more sketches and pieces, and then we did that at the Comedy Festival in Wellington and the Comedy Festival in Auckland, and we were doing really well. At Bats Theatre, the crowds were loving it. We had a good crowd in Wellington, good crowd in Auckland. Then we got asked to go to Melbourne Comedy Festival. We went to Melbourne Comedy Festival, and no one came to our show. They all didn't like it at all. So we had like a couple of people, and then we had this 3-week contract, and then we got closed down after a week because there was no one in the audience. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a bit brutal, but we had fun. Yeah.
Wow. And was that the catalyst that made you drop out of university, like the success of that show, or did that come after?
It was all kind of blurs together. I was just really busy. I didn't quite have time. I was there was a thing called terms, I think, where you had to reach a certain. I didn't go to university enough. I was too busy doing shows and touring with bands and stuff. So I was that was falling apart. But I was very busy and and quite successful with the arts work. Yeah.
I mean, you're like actually doing the practical element of it. You know what I mean? And then you're like studying like the theoretical probably side of things. So
yeah, I really loved I studied English, so I loved reading all the books and stuff. And I studied music composition, and there were some amazing instructors there, like lecturers they're called, right? Like John Posadas and Jack Boddy and Ross Harris, and really amazing New Zealand composers. So what was cool about that was it was very intellectual, but so I had this really interesting combination of intellectual work at the university where I'm being exposed to artworks and music that's really ridiculous. Like you would get rice and throw it across the music paper and then write the notes where it lands.
Wow.
And you're like, that's great. And then you come up with this crazy sounding stuff.
Yeah.
And then at night I'm going, voodoo baguette, so it's this really interesting combination, and I think it was quite helpful.
Yeah.
Keep my mind open.
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome. And when it comes to like, I don't know, I feel because yourself and Jemaine, you guys are the duo that has made the magic happen with the Conchords. I kind of imagine in my head like this magical moment when you guys meet and like lock eyes across like the drama club. Was it anything sort of like that? Like how would you describe like your early, I guess, friendship with Jemaine?
I think we found each other really funny. Yeah, but like we were in that group. So Jemaine and Taika were actually really tight. They were buddies for me. And then a guy called David Lawrence and he's a Wellington Shakespeare guy. There were 5 of us, and Carrie was the other guy. And I don't know. Everyone, I wouldn't say it was like this. No, it wasn't like a sort of rom-com moment.
Yeah, but, I think it's I've got in my head for some reason.
Yeah. Casio beat starts playing.
Exactly. The light shines down.
Yeah, but we did get on really well, and it's funny. Conchords really happened in amongst a lot of other projects. Like it was a really cool time in Wellington. There was a lot of theatre being made, and a lot of Bats Theatre. You could put on a show, and you just had to pay 10% of your door to put it on. So it didn't matter if no one came because you just paid it $50, whatever you made. And the Conchords, that piece was in amongst other shows that were equally as successful. That wasn't, but that was a really strong one. Yeah.
When did you first start getting like, because this was, I think what is interesting for the audience as well, especially if there's some like younger listeners, is this was all unfolding like pre-social media days.
Yeah.
So like, and I guess your growth happened, so like it had to have happened organically, right? Through like people talking about it. Hey, this is real crack up guys. Like,
Oh yeah, man. We were in the day where you handed out flyers.
Wow.
You walked around town. Like when we went to Australia and did that show in our nudie suits,
Yeah.
you know, we were in Melbourne on the main street dressed in these naked costumes handing out flyers.
Pieces
and
of
people were
paper.
just looking at us like, you are such weirdos. What is going on? And they didn't come to our show. Well, it was not very successful marketing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. Like what were the slow moving like factors of Fly the Conchords success? Like did you really sense like a momentum shift? And if so, at what point was that?
It was it was very organic, I guess is what you could say. But it was very you'd take a step forward. So we played at Bats Theatre, and you had 100 people. And you might do 4 nights, and that was mostly full. So that was really successful. Coming from the small club where there were 15 people, and then we did Auckland, then we did the Downstage Theatre, and then the next step was the success. There wasn't so much that the momentum, but so each. I mean, I could step through the steps if you want, and here, but it's more that they, you know, we started touring. There were some challenges where things didn't work, but we got to Edinburgh, and then Edinburgh we did 3 years in a row. You go back, and we did it each year. And the first year we had 10 people in the audience, but by the end of the 26 nights, you play for three weeks in a row. You play every night. We had 100 people, you know. And the next year we went back, and then you started with 100 people, and so that by the end we had 200 people.
Yeah.
And then the next year we went back and we started with 300 people, and you know I think we were sold out, maybe 400 people each night.
Wow.
On the third year.
Wow.
So and amongst this there are these steps happening, and so the success feels like you've just stepped. That's the success of audience is quite measurable, but on a different level you've got the response of the audience, which is probably the more important thing. Right? And that didn't change that much. So when we played at the Fringe Festival at the very beginning, the audience loved it, right? Even though it was for one song. That same song we played for the next 3 years to, you know, hundreds of people, thousands of people. And then later playing huge shows. So I would tour UK and to the States, and we played to the Hollywood Bowl, right? And there's 20,000 people, and it's the same joke, baguette, and it's the same response. It's interesting, like they laugh at the same points in that little room as they did in this giant room. So something. So it's like if you the songs and the show was working. Something was working about it, so that we got better and better at it, obviously, and you fine-tuned it, but there was something about it that worked from the beginning, which was what worked about it, still works about it today.
I feel, because especially like, and we'll go to the TV show in a bit, but particularly around like the music, the flavor, the sort of style of comedy, your style of comedy is like so classical, like Kiwi, awkward, almost self-deprecating sort of humor. And I'm just really interested to understand, like, why do you think that resonated so much with like a global audience? Because it's, you know, quite left field to like mainstream like comedy, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, when we started, the comedy was there was a broad style to comedy. Sketch comedy in the 90s was quite broad, and stand-up was quite broad. Musical comedy was certainly and often is a little like hammer over the head. And I'd come from, my dad had done a lot of musical theatre, and something about him, I was always like, oh God, I can't stand that style of acting. Or it's like, you know, really over the top.
Yeah.
They're like, you know, you're under arrest.
Yeah,
oh no, you know, just really big acting. Like, this is, I just never liked that. I always liked the understated.
Yeah.
And I found that really funny, the sort of the minimal performance style I found more interesting and at the time. And so we noticed that was one creative kind of stepping stone, is that early on we tried a version of Conchords where we were kind of Wembley rockers.
Okay.
So, because anyone who's seen our live show, we sing songs, and then in between we talk pretty much like this, very casual and understated, and that's quite unusual. At the time, that was quite unusual for stand-ups to be so low key. and for comedy. But we travel and we're like, "Are you ready to rock? All right, Wellington, we're gonna rock." Baguette, so we tried a different style.
Yeah.
Where when we spoke, we were really over the top.
Yeah.
And we did that one time where we pretended to be Bowie, I think, for a whole night, and Jemaine just lost his voice. But and then the next night he couldn't speak, so I just had to do all the talking for the next show. But yeah, it didn't work as well as the Understated, which actually felt more Kiwi as well. Obviously the Wembley Rocker would have been a little abstract. So being Kiwis, Understated, I guess a little bit more inspired by Fred Dagg. Do you know if you watch the Fred Dagg videos? And John Clark, the really good comedian, who I didn't know that well. I knew Fred Dagg, but that Fred Dagg character is a bit like a farmer guy. One of his famous lines was, "Oh, that'll be the phone."
Yeah.
They kind of, "G'day, how's it going?" "Oh, pretty good."
Yeah,
that kind of, "Yeah, pretty good." That kind of tone.
Yeah.
But we were like a sort of city version of that. I can't remember what the question was. But one last little point about that sort of tone, that's right, why that sort of New Zealand style. And one more thing that was interesting was like, often duos very competitive, and that the comedy came from one one
like competitive between each other.
That's a classic comedy duo structure. Works really well because you get comedy out of the conflict.
Yep.
But we played a version which ended up being that helped it be unusual in the comedy world. Is like we might compliment each other, like, "That was really good, Jemaine." "Yeah, good job, Bret. Well done." "That was good." Yeah, so it's like two nice guys trying to help each other in this world where usually it's like, "What a dick! Look at this idiot!" That's the tone. So that actually made it stand out in another. People found that funny, and another was like, "This is weird seeing these two guys be nice to each other."
Yeah, true.
And then it was a blessing overseas because a lot of things that Americans find funny about us, and we're not even joking, we're just being New Zealanders, but something they it's like the accent and the low keyness, they think we're joking.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's cool to hear like almost the psychology behind it. I think that's really fascinating. I guess for what like the audience don't see, we see the end finalized products where you're both on stage performing these songs and just having an awesome time. But behind the scenes, I'm keen to also understand, like, how did you, like, what was the creative process to actually like writing the songs with Jemaine and writing them together? Because I imagine that would have been just absolutely hilarious. Like, you probably had some of your best sessions, like behind closed doors at a flat in Wellington, just like, "What do you think about this, man?" Like,
that's right.
How did you come up with them?
Well, often when you're writing comedy stuff, you laugh at the very beginning. It's funny, like when someone says something funny, it's funny right then and there, and then you can retell a funny story, and it's funny, but often there's something hysterical at that first moment, and you might just start laughing, and you keep laughing, and you can. I mean, as a flatmates, it would be quite annoying because we'd just play the same song all day long, laughing, but also trying really hard to get the song right. But there were lots of really funny gags, like, and we spend a lot of time crafting the songs. We spend
How long was that?
I mean, it's hard to say because they're all different, but we would you get them on their feet, and then we'd test them in front of a crowd, and then see. One thing that's interesting is sometimes things that we thought were going to be really funny, the audience doesn't laugh at, and so you're like, "Oh, it turns out that's not as funny as we thought." but and sometimes things that you didn't realize were actually really a big joke about the song reveal themselves with an audience. That's one of the cool things about a live audience, which is such a blessing. If for comedy, the audience is so integral to what you're doing. So it was that really helps inform and develop the song. Does that make sense? So the song at the beginning, when you first play it, usually is a first step, and then you might fix things up and dial it in, and then you can hear when to hit what moments to try and hit. Yeah.
Was there a particular song that was like the hardest to write? And then on the opposite to that, like the song that sort of came to you guys the quickest?
Well,
stand out?
we did a song. There's a song about Bowie's in space. It's like a sort of funny parody of David Bowie, and that came about when we were driving through Wellington in my car, listening to Radioactive, and they were running a competition. You could phone in to win free tickets or something to something, and it must have been, yeah. So we phoned in pretending to be David Bowie, wanting to enter the competition because we've been driving around being like, hey, man, it's Bowie here. We're just talking to each other like we were Bowie, just goofing around basically. And then we phoned in to the radio station to pretend to be Bowie, wanting to enter the competition. And then we went back to the flat and then started just writing a song about us pretending to be Bowie. And yeah, I would say it probably took a day or two to write, and then we'd play it the next week. It didn't take long to write. Yeah. I don't really remember exactly, but we were just so amused by being Bowie that we would, just kept on throwing out ideas for what Bowie might say.
Yeah. Bowie's in space.
Yeah. So that was really fun, and then other songs took years to write because we'd start them, and then a couple of years would go by, and there was this one called Stanna, which I don't even know if it might be on the London Live special. I think we managed to finish it. It took us about 10 years to write. Wow. And we just kept on going. Not that we were working the whole time on it, but we'd just abandon it. It was hard to get it to work.
I'll have to check that one out.
It's really long. We could never remember all the words.
What's it about, that one?
It's about a guy, sort of a country western song, Stanna, who he kills everyone in the town. I can't remember now. Yeah.
Sounds wholesome.
Yeah.
So you start doing these sort of like international shows. You're in Edinburgh in the Fringe Festival. I think you do like a similar sort of festival over in Canada as well. And then you land that sort of BBC radio segment, which is kind of like the almost like prelude to what would become the show in many ways. When you came to the concept of sort of like pitching a show, is this something you guys always had thought of? Or did it come quite sort of like organically?
Yeah, again, it came sort of organically, not sort of overusing that word, but we were playing the Edinburgh Festival, and one of the cool things about the festival is there are people from the BBC there. There are people from TV shows, radio shows, and different, it's just full of media people looking for interesting artists or ideas. Yep. And you get asked to do, like, we would maybe play a song on a show, be a guest on a BBC comedy event show type thing. So we did a few of those, and you start connecting with people, and then they develop comedy shows with what they used to anyway with radio shows. So this is quite a traditional path for comedy shows. True. And the Goonies, I think, is their classic one, and Mighty Boosh did a radio show around the same time, and it was clear to us that would be a really great step forward, not a too big a jump forward. We were probably quite cautious. We got offered a TV show at the same time, but we decided to go for a radio show because we thought we could figure things out a little bit.
True, get some reps in.
Yeah, and also the show itself, even though people really liked it, it wasn't clear what it would turn into as a narrative. Does that make sense? It was like these two guys on stage chatting and singing songs. It's like there's not a story. A lot of TV shows are like, what's your life? Yeah. Then your life becomes the show. Yeah. And which I guess is what happened with Conchords once we figured it out. But so the radio show was this cool way to try it out, and that's when we started working with Rhys Darby, who we knew from New Zealand, the comedy scene, and we'd been hung out in Edinburgh a lot, and the radio show was ridiculously. We tried this technique where we would improvise. We had mini discs, which was like ridiculous, like a crazy technology for a while, and we would improvise these scenes, and we massively, overly, elaborately worked these quite simple ideas, but it was good for us to learn what to do. Yeah. And
when you, like, I guess after that, that's where it came into, there was like maybe probably some other offers coming around, and TVNZ, I believe, like didn't actually fund the sort of concept of the pilot TV show that you guys had in mind. I think it was quite different to what you originally pitched for the HBO special.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you think they didn't see?
Can I just add a little piece that you might put in a bit before?
Yeah,
I
go.
forgot. And what I mean by this is that we went to the Tower of London to record a scene where we're shooting an arrow into the air at the Tower of London, and it comes down and hits us. But we obviously didn't need to go to the actual Tower of London to record this because you can't see it. We went real method on our radio show.
So you actually went to the Tower of London for the audio?
Yeah, which you can't hear. It was so stupid. And the guy from BBC was like, "Could we do this just in the car park?" Or, no, we want to try it like this. Yeah.
It's so good.
Anyway, back to your next question. The TVNZ thing. Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, because I believe there's like a few sort of misses with the TV show like landing, particularly in New Zealand. I think there's some other outlets that
That's
were
right.
sort of
Yeah, I think it was
interested
our third try.
Yeah.
When we got the TV show to work for HBO.
Yeah, like
We had a New Zealand one, at least one, I think, New Zealand one, and we had an NBC pilot.
Mhm.
And the New Zealand one, I think the show was about us being time travelers, and we were going to be members of every famous New Zealand band. Like we were going to be part of Split Enz, we were going to be part of the Howard Morrison Quartet, and we were going to be, we were going to travel through time. To be honest, I mean, it probably wasn't as good a show, but they turned it down, and that's all right. That was a blessing in disguise,
for sure.
Because then we did NBC. The show was from Edinburgh.
Yeah.
So again, we're at the Edinburgh Festival, and they had there's a woman called Lisa Leingang, who's an amazing TV producer who was there looking at shows, and then she'd go to people and say, "Look, would you like to come to America and try and do something?" And
right.
and so we got invited to work on a pilot, and that's what we were starting to figure it out. I think that was after the radio show. Well, yeah, and in that version, we had a manager. We were set in LA, and the band was like, we were trying to make it in LA, and the manager was an American, and we worked with a great American writer called Lester Lewis, and it was starting to get there, but it was a little broad. We hadn't quite got the voice right, but there were similarities. We had a friend who was going to be Arj Barker, and we had...
Was he Dave?
Dave, yeah. So that's in the TV show. He's a comedian, a friend of ours. And and we had a manager, and we were a band trying to make it in America. But yeah, there were some things. There was one interesting thing about Los Angeles is that you don't walk around because it's a city that you drive in.
True.
It wasn't as good as a city where you walk.
Yeah, like New York.
And so then the third time when HBO asked us to write a pilot, that's when we connected up with James Bobin, who was the director of Ali G, and he had moved to a bunch of the Ali G, Sacha Baron Cohen's team moved to LA, and so we connected with him. Really smart comedy director, and he helped us fine tune it and keep sort of our voice, and which was more like a British comedy style, but set it in America. And at the time, me and Jemaine were kind of new to America. James had only been in America a year, so we were finding America kind of funny and interesting because it was different, and we were able to put all that into our show.
How far through, especially like pitching a TV series for a pilot to HBO, like do you have to have like all of the script all sort of completed?
No,
like,
you have nothing.
Not really. So they're just like, okay, cool, sounds good, let's do it.
Yeah, they see, that's fun. You guys are funny. Do you want to try and make a funny TV show? Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So you have full sort of creative control.
Yeah, you can you come up with an idea and then you tell them, and then as long as they like it. But we were lucky because we weren't their main show. We were kind of like a side show, which is often the case when things that are interesting get made on the sidelines. They were making a show called Entourage. It was a big show at the time, and really there were a few expensive shows, and we were a cheap show. So they were like, do what you want as long as you can do it for the budget. They were quite happy for us to try something different.
Crazy.
We weren't their main focus.
True.
They weren't really paying attention.
Right. I'm sure they ended up paying quite a lot of attention.
Yeah, they got more into it. As it went on. Yeah.
Man, because I remember, because the filming for the TV show, was it around sort of 2007
Yeah.
time?
Yeah.
I remember being like, I would have been like 10, 11, and yeah, my old man like showing me the episodes and just finding it like hilarious, even as like an 11-year-old, just seeing like, I don't know, it was something about seeing two Kiwis in like a environment which is so not like New Zealand.
Yeah, but also you've seen it on TV.
Yeah.
You sort of knew about it.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the beautiful things about the show was it was watched by a lot of parents with their kids.
Mm.
And that wasn't really intentional, but often would be doing live shows and people come along and the audience members, the parents would say, oh, thank you so much. This has been really cool for us because it's something that we've been able to watch with our teenage kids or like 10, 11-year-old kids.
Yeah.
And it became a thing that it brought families kind of closer together.
Yeah.
Obviously completely unintentional, but
yeah,
it's quite cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Mm.
Because obviously it was such a massive success, you guys only did 2 seasons. When did your life sort of start changing, like amid the TV show, when there was like more fame, more popularity?
Yeah, that was really interesting. Like
what's that like?
The first season, we could film anywhere because we looked like we were a student film. We were filming in a park in New York, and some members of the public walked past and said, oh, is this a student? Are you guys doing a student film? We're like, no, this is a legitimate TV show. Yeah. And then the first season was very successful. And then the second season, it became more challenging to film on the street because people would recognize us. And we would walk down the street and people would follow us. And it was quite a different time.
Yeah.
Really different. I mean, before that, you're just hanging out in New York, go out, do whatever you want. No one knows who you are. Yeah. And then 1 year later, we get recognized, or people come up to us all the time, and it was a big change.
Is that a hard like adjustment, especially from maybe wanting to be like a bit more of like a personal person? Now you got people, or like there must just be such a drastic change to normality.
It was really crazy, and you learn quite quickly a few things like. Going out on Friday, Saturday night is not so good because people are when they're drunk, are a bit too
in your face. Yeah.
And then you just learn these little tricks to like navigate not getting yourself into a
full-blown conversation.
No, not a conversation, but you'd often have, my wife Hannah was brilliant at like, and Jemaine and friends are great at intersecting when they see. You see people like I can see Jemaine's getting trapped.
Yeah.
You go like, hey dude, we gotta go, man. Or like someone you've got to just intersect. Yeah. Because there's weird little things, little tricks you can help navigate those challenges. But most of the time it was so great because people loved our show and they loved our music and they loved us. So it wasn't bad. It was like getting positive. Even to this day, people come up and they're really positive. So it made me think, wow, what would it be like if you were a politician who did something terrible and you were famous for something bad?
Yeah.
Then that would be hard. This was pretty easy, I think.
Yeah. Have you guys had any stalkers? Because in your TV show, you've got like your number one fan who like follows you around, like all of the narrative, got the name of that actor's name. But yeah, have you guys had any like sort of stalkers over the years, or any like crazed fans?
We've had some people really committed, and but nothing that's become like a issue like that. Okay, yeah. It was funny when my kids were little. I'd walk down Kiwi Street and people were like, hey Bret. New Zealanders are much more subdued, but they still say hello. And I remember my kids when they're little going like, man, do you know everyone? You know everyone. Is that a friend of yours? Who's that? Who's that friend of yours? Yeah, it's funny.
And especially like filming a TV show must just be such a fucking full on time, especially for like the hours. Did that take much of a toll on you personally?
Yeah, it was a long time ago now, but it was incredibly hard work and stressful. And I didn't have kids, so it was different. It's probably similar to having having a young kid, that kind of, that fatigue where you're just exhausted, but you've got to keep working. You've got to keep looking after them and get up and stuff. It was very, very hard. And that's why we didn't carry on, because we were finding it too hard, really.
Too taxing.
It was too brutal. And Jemaine had his son that a year before, I think, and my wife Hannah was pregnant with our first kid, and there was a shift happening, and so it wasn't something that I wanted to do. It didn't feel like the best thing to do for my health and well-being.
Yeah. It's amazing to have that like sort of foresight. I guess obviously having kids like changes everything.
Yeah, and I hadn't had a kid, but I could see it coming.
Yeah,
and
see
there's
it
a
coming.
full body reaction on. It's interesting. You get a phone call or an email saying they want to do a new season, or the show's been picked up.
Mm-hmm.
First season, I remember I was with actually James Boban, and we got the message they want to make the first season because you make the pilot first, does the first year, and like so excited, thrilled, like whoa, this is big news. We get to make
crazy.
a TV show. This is great, you know. And then when we got the email with the message, the phone call saying they want to make a second season, I remember my whole body just being like, oh, like this sort of like physical, like holy no, I don't know if I can do this.
Wow.
And then so we did the second season. I think your body starts to tell you, like, okay, you got to figure out something. So you got to find a better way to do this.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's so interesting. Your whole body's reacting to like the trauma.
It was hard to breathe. Yeah,
Shit.
I remember it being hard to breathe, and it was. We didn't have the experience or someone in our team who knew to put the brakes a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's hard because when you're in show business, you have to kind of strike while the iron's hot. That's just how it works. You have to kind of, the opportunities come when things are happening, they come. And so, and it's about navigating that window. And I think, you know, obviously in the show we had a ridiculous manager, but in reality we probably needed someone in the team to help go, okay guys, they're completely burnt out. We need to figure out a way that is not as hard on Jemaine and me, and then but at the same time what was cool about the show was the voice, our voices coming through. So it was hard to, if you take that workload off us, you lose some of the voice in the show. Yeah,
that's right. It's like real catch.
It's
22,
very tricky. This is about trust.
Did you have any? It doesn't sound like it, but did you have any regrets? Because I guess that would be such a hard decision to make.
Well, it wasn't a hard decision at all because it felt like the completely right thing to do.
True. I mean, just like stepping away from like.
I felt great.
Yeah.
like
no more body aches.
Neither of us wanted to do it, so
it
wasn't. That was pretty easy.
It was a very mutual decision.
Yeah, it was an easy decision. Neither of us were feeling. It was too hard. Yeah.
Has HBO circled back and been like, "Hey guys"?
Oh, they did for a few years. Yeah. I mean, they're like, Now it would be so weird. It would be these two old dudes. I actually kind of think might be quite cool. Maybe in about 10 years, if we're like really fully grey.
Silver Fox.
Yeah. Like these two old guys singing songs about doing dick jokes. Like, I think it might be funny again.
What would the premise be for the older?
I guess the reunion to like an old rockers band. We could almost do that now. Actually, we look pretty old.
That's so good. That's amazing. It must have been such a crazy like roller coaster experience, and especially dipping your toes into sort of like Hollywood and like US popularity. You guys were on like David Letterman, Conan show in 2012, Stephen Colbert in 2018. Like especially for those like mainstream interview shows, like what are they like sort of behind the scenes? Is it like, do you get prepared the questions in advance? And I loved one of the interviews I think you did with Stephen Colbert, and I don't know, just like the Kiwi humor was like, he was almost, I felt like watching it, it was tough for him to get a read on you guys.
Yes, because we're a little unusual because most of the guests are very ambitious.
Yeah, and over the top.
And career driven.
Yeah.
And we have this anomaly of like these two guys who don't seem to be too fussed about the career. And even though we are very hardworking and quite driven, but in terms of your question about the shows, they don't tell you the questions, no. And one of the cool things about that, you can't really tell some of the questions, as I'm sure you know, doing a podcast. The best thing is when it's got that moment when it happens. Yeah. And but it's very nerve-wracking. I mean, even me and Jemaine, we've done a lot of things like that. We still were like practicing the song. We're trying to get the song right and practicing and trying to nail it, and you very nervous about those
Yeah.
appearances. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is such a huge global audience, eh? Just like millions of people watch those shows in particular.
Yeah, that's right. And it's something about I think Letterman felt like a sort of apex because everyone in New Zealand had heard of it. Yeah. Really, really fun. I mean, all those people are so great and the teams are really cool around them. Like Stephen Colbert is a huge New Zealand fan. I'm sure
Yeah, he's come into the bunch, eh?
Yeah, we did a little video with Lucy Lawless and me and him about New Zealand food and stuff, and he loves Lord of the Rings. He's a huge New Zealand fan. Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah.
At the time when you're in the States, like, what did you think the perception of New Zealand was from an American audience? Was it only Lord of the Rings?
It was only Lord of the Rings. Yeah, you get in taxis. It was pre-Uber. Get in the taxi and they say from New Zealand, and all those jokes like, oh yeah, all right. Is it in England? Like, no. And then they're like, Lord of the Rings. Oh yeah. And that was the only touchstone. That was the only, is that the right word? The only connector they had, really.
Crazy. And probably Flight of the Conchords. It was probably Lord of the Rings, Flight of the Conchords.
As time's gone on, then it became Flight of the Conchords added into that little handful of New Zealand things. That's for Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah, British have really different, but Americans don't really know much about New Zealand.
No, or sometimes the world.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. That's a big country.
Did you feel much pressure, like almost representing like Kiwi culture in a way through the show?
We had done so much touring. Early on, we learnt to adjust our material so it wasn't too New Zealand centric, even though our characters were like you say before, we're very New Zealand-ish or whatever. But we adjusted our songs so lyrically we would keep things so they would work in Edinburgh. We took out, if there was a joke that was something too specific about New Zealand that people wouldn't understand, we would take them out and change it so it would play more universally. Yeah,
nice. Then in 2010, just skipping a little bit here, you got the call to be a music supervisor for the Muppets. That must be surreal. Like everyone knows the Muppets, like from a kid. Like how does that phone call sort of arrange itself, and how does that opportunity come to you?
Well, the director from Conchords was directing the movie, so it was a very simple step in terms of the connection. What was unusual was, in some ways, I was very successful at that point. 2010, our TV show had been really successful in the comedy world, and we had a big, strong audience in America and around lots of countries around the world. But it hadn't broken into the film world. So when I had the meeting to do that job, they didn't know what Flight of the Conchords was, the people at Disney, because it wasn't that big. It was big to an extent, but then not so big that people in the Hollywood would all know about it. Some people would, but not everyone. And so they didn't really. The only reason they hired me really was because the director requested I do it. They didn't go, oh, he's great. They didn't really trust me. So when we did the first round of songs, I remember really clearly they had another song for Man or Muppet, that moment in the movie, and then I wrote another one. I wrote my own version of that song. There were multiple songs for different moments in the song, different moments in the film. Sorry, and they liked the other ones, but James was pushing for me to get to do the ones that he knew would have a little more comedy to them. Yeah, and it was really interesting. They really didn't trust me on the job. But that was cool. It was a good challenge. So I had to really prove that I could step up and do something that's on a much bigger scale. Yeah. The music, like the recordings on those are just so much more complicated than anything we did on Conchords. Yeah. We were like Cassia Tones guitars and a few little pianos and bits and pieces. Suddenly it was like an orchestra or a full band and giant brass section, a choir. It just jumped up to a different scale. Yeah. But at the same time, the song writing is the same. Yeah. But there's a big pressure on those.
Yeah, a lot of moving pieces. And do they give you like full creative freedom to be like, okay, Bret, write sort of what you want and come back to us and pitch it back in, and then we'll see if it can be included in the show? Like, how does that process actually work?
They do. They say you go and write the song and then you present the demo and stuff. And what's funny is one of them, they're not all perfect. You get hits and misses when you're writing songs, but one of them, I remember the notes. This is like classic Hollywood studio notes. You get notes saying, "We love it. We love the song, but can you change the chorus?" And we think the verse lyric could be different, and maybe the bridge could be different.
Basically,
You're like-
everything.
You're like, wait a minute, guys. But most of the time, it was a pretty good flow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice. No, that's amazing. And that song, Man or Muppet, it's funny because in a Kiwi sense, the word Muppet is like, oh, you're a Muppet, mate.
I know, yeah. It's a kind of derogatory.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're like, oh, what an idiot, you Muppet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like whenever I hear that song, I've kind of got the derogatory like Muppet
yeah,
like tone in my voice, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But probably more like American audiences wouldn't even think of it like that. They're thinking about an actual Muppet. I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't think they use the word Muppet the way we do
Yeah.
sometimes, or we used to. Yeah.
It's a great word.
Yeah,
You're a
your Muppet. Yeah. Yeah, it was a really cool gig, and it was a perfect combination of, Conchords is really a lot like the Muppets in many ways. There's funny songs, there's two characters, and so it was an easy creative step, I think. Yeah.
And you obviously nominated and won an Oscar for that song, Man or Muppet, which is
crazy, right? Yeah, it was crazy
dude.
cool. Yeah.
So like, how does someone give you a phone call to say, hey, you've been nominated? Like,
Yeah, there's a whole run of things. Like they have actually a whole season of there's a lot of different awards. There's like the Writers Guilds. There's sort of each film festivals and areas have like their own little awards.
Yeah.
And so I guess they call it the awards season. But you start to see signs that something might have success because it wins smaller awards first, and then they sort of start coming behind it to support it.
Yeah.
And Disney supports it. And I did the press. I've done a lot of press over the years, done a lot of interviews. Sorry, I've leaned off the microphone. I'm back on the microphone. I've never done so many interviews. It's just astonishing
Must
how
be
much
crazy.
it was crazy doing radio, like sitting in a room just talking to radio stations around the world for 5 hours, and then go and do interviews, and then you do this cool run of the week before. There's all these like dinners, and sort of they have a thing for all the nominees. It's so fun. And it's done alphabetically. So you just, you're lined up alphabetically with the photo of all the nominees. And I just remember kept on seeing Meryl Streep every day for a while. I was like, oh, this is my new life. I get to see Meryl Streep around.
Insane.
And then went to one party. I was like, my friend was like, whoa, it's like we're in a real life Madame Tussauds. Because just like, it's all these movie stars. Because the films world is so movie starry. You go to the bathroom, you're like, oh, whoa, George Clooney's in the bathroom.
Crazy.
It was really crazy and super fun.
Man.
And it often I think, and this is a long time ago now, it's over 10 years ago, but I think people imagine that's what life in LA is like. And obviously it's not like that at all. It's, just going to the supermarket, driving to work, meeting people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still really fun, but
Yeah.
you're not like at parties with, movie stars all the
George
time.
Clooney.
Yeah.
Like what did that moment actually feel like for you when they called out your name? I think it was Will Ferrell and Zach Galifianakis.
Yeah. It was amazing. I'm actually slightly afraid of public speaking, so which is weird considering it's sort of my job. But I don't like doing speeches very much, so I actually completely can't remember any of that. Yeah, I think I was so stressed out about trying to remember a speech and something to say, and just having to deal with that environment. Yeah, that's all a bit of a blackout. I remember just going backstage, and Oprah Winfrey's backstage, and Tom Cruise, and there's like a little green room, and my wife Hannah came backstage to meet me, and Brian, got to get it right, Glazer, I think Glazer, he's the producer. He's like, oh, Brett, do you know Tom? I was like, no, I don't know Tom. Hi, Tom.
Cruise, long time no see.
It was so cool, man. Yeah, it's really crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. And like, I guess what were the months sort of following like as well? Like, do you think that moment of winning an Oscar like also changed your life in many ways?
I think so. I think it's like Conchords, the TV show, really established us in in the comedy TV world, and our audience, from that, the support of the audience, and that's still carried on to this day. And then the Disney Muppets films gave me particularly that Oscar really did give me the opportunity to work in film, doing music for film. That door was just like came
Wide open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember the agent, messaging me saying, "Oh, who do you want to meet? You can meet anyone. Just say who you want to meet. We'll organize a meeting." And it was really, the door literally just opens to whatever you want to do.
Who did you choose to meet with? Did you take up that offer?
I didn't really, but I mean, I just had work. I was sort of busy, but it is interesting how it's a very helpful.
Yeah.
It's very handy in Hollywood to have an Oscar.
Looks pretty good on the CV.
Yeah. Yes, really good.
That's incredible. Was there any like never meet your hero moments? Like when you're in that circle in Hollywood, was there anyone in particular that like just rubbed off the wrong way?
Not really. There was some again, there was some people, like there was some producers who, it was that similar to what you talk about with Stephen Colbert, not knowing how to figure out where Jemaine and I are at, like that clash of cultures, that New Zealand understatedness, which is, very much my personality. And I had to learn to be a little more confident in America, to just even seem vaguely interested. There was one time where Jemaine and I had a meeting with a film producer, and they're like, "Do you have any ideas?" And we're like, "Oh, maybe got some." And we left the meeting, and then the agent called us and said, "Yeah, what happened at the meeting? He said you guys weren't interested and you didn't really want to do anything." And we're like, "Oh no, we just didn't have any ideas." And then the next meeting, he said, "I think you guys just need to just give it a bit more energy, And we went to the next meeting, and we were like, "Yeah, we'd love to make a movie. Yeah, well, maybe something about a robot or something." And then we leave that meeting, and the agent gets called going, "They want to buy the movie." So just by putting a bit of energy and enthusiasm in, it made the Americans understand us a bit more.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It totally does. Have you ever dealt with like the feeling of like imposter syndrome as well? This is like quite a common question I ask most guests. Have you ever suffered with imposter syndrome?
Not too much. I know what you mean. With the TV show, we didn't know what we were doing, but we were quite open about that, and because we hadn't made a TV show and we were sort of finding our way. And similarly, working on the films, I didn't know exactly what I was doing, but I always have quite a strong, if I really like my idea or the idea and I believe in the work, it doesn't seem to be a problem for me. To be honest.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then you've sort of recently in 2022 like pivoted to launch your own like sort of independent album, which is really cool. Songs Without Jokes. Great album, by the way. It must be very tricky sort of pivoting from like comedy to not actual songwriting. You know what
completely
I mean?
Confusing for the audience.
Yeah.
And really hard, actually, much harder than I anticipated for people to get their head around it being different. But in the fact, once I started performing live, it was actually a really funny show because I couldn't help myself telling funny stories. And
true.
So the show itself ended up being very funny, even though the record is quite sort of moody. And it was challenging. And I've got a new record coming out this year, so I'm continuing down this challenging path. But I've sort of learnt a lot more about how to, I think, lead the audience with me, if that makes sense. I realized people like to go and watch things that they know what they're going to get. Yeah. And it's harder for people if they don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of thought of it as like, Daniel Radcliffe, the Harry Potter actor. Like whenever I see him in a movie, I'm like, you're Harry Potter.
Yeah. Hard to believe, eh?
Yeah. And do you think, I know it's almost quite similar, I guess, from having, cementing yourself in sort of like comedy, music, and now the film industry, then pivoting towards like a different type of genre. There must be so much as well that goes into even just how you have to write the songs. I think I heard on an interview, even like you can now do choruses, which is great.
Yeah, I can repeat a chorus.
Yeah, because otherwise...
often in Conchords we couldn't repeat a chorus because the audience would be bored.
Yeah, you say the same joke twice.
Yeah, you can't repeat it. We'd always add a new line. Yeah, it is... I really like it. And I think now I realize like I don't need to try too hard to be serious, if that makes sense. people can cope with it, no problem. I saw that once it was live with an audience, and I can do something that's funny, and then I can do a song that's not necessarily funny. That's the audience are fine with that as long as they get some funny. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I think as well, there's like this assumption that creative people are just like gifted. Like, how much do you think your success has been around sort of talent versus like pure persistence?
It's a good combination, I think, of the two. Like, I've definitely worked like a maniac. And anyone who knows me knows I'm pretty much always working on stuff. You know, you just don't know which things are going to be successful and everything. But, and then, yeah, so persistence for sure. Like, and Jemaine and I worked, it was 10 years, I think, of touring from we started the band to the TV show, to the success. So maybe the end of the second season. And we'd done thousands and thousands of shows, fine-tuning it, figuring it out. So we'd toured a lot. And but at the same time, with this, like I said before, when we first started playing the songs, there was something there that was sort of immediately there. That wasn't persistence. There was an idea and a sort of creative thing that I guess you could describe as a gift, but it's probably it is a natural skill. Jemaine is a very funny person, a very funny actor. He can make things funnier than they are, and then if they are actually funny, they're hilarious. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's great.
And then so I think it's a combination. But both very, I would say, all the people that I know that are successful are pretty hardworking.
Is that like the common trait across most of the successful people you know? Is there like any that sort of jump out to you?
Well, it's sort of hardworking or maybe just obsessive in their own nature, which you could call hardworking, or you could call just that's how they are. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
People that doesn't need to be their career. That could be their I don't know, their mountain biking thing that they're really into.
Yeah,
but
true.
It's just like they're like on every night they're off doing it or whatever. Yeah.
That's awesome. We got some questions from some of the audience of our Beyond the Surface as well.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So we'll go through them. Then we've got some standard sort of questions which I ask all of our guests, and we sort of finish with a quote. But just want to say, a massive thanks, Bret. This has been so awesome to have you on the show.
Not too rambly. Ramble.
Podcasts are meant for rambles, eh?
That's good.
But no, really appreciate your time. This has been awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. We've got first question here is from Luke. Have you ever had periods of creative burnout or hit roadblocks of uncertainty?
Yeah, definitely burnout. And one thing that I think is helpful about being a Kiwi, is particularly in the arts, is often people do multiple jobs. Like you do this podcast and then you've got another job that you do. You've got multiple things going on. So when I was working in theatre and music, and still am, I have a handful of projects going on. So I think it's helpful because they often fall apart, and then they're often successful. But it means that if one falls apart, it's not even got everything on that one thing. So that I think helps me with creative blocks. Does that make sense?
There's always something else to go to.
There's something else to go to, and I would say that would be the one helpful thing. The other thing is I've got 3 kids, so I just have to make the most of my window when they're not at home.
Hectic. Cool. We got a second one. This is from Chelsea. Is it still business time, Bret?
I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah, it's a tough one to answer. We got one here from Jackson Garden Bishop. Did you write the songs first and make the TV shows around them, or vice versa?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. The first season is all TV songs that pre-existed. The second season of the TV show, the songs were written mostly for the TV show. And so the first season would build stories that could incorporate those ideas. And the second season, we started to learn that, you can write a song about a story which is different. Each have their own strengths, but that became a little more like a musical technique. And
True.
it's very satisfying to have the song relate to the story.
Was there any particular songs that you're like, how the hell are we going to fit this into the first season? Like, how are we going to start singing about X or like robots or mermaids?
I think most of them. We had a war. We put little cards up with the different songs. Like, what could that be? What could go in? Yeah. And there's one. There's one called Bus Driver, which is a song I really like. We wrote a long time ago, but we kept on trying to get that in, and it didn't end up making it. We put it in, and then it was really weird for there to be a New Zealand character giving a small town tour guide. The song is a tour of a small town by a bus driver. So it was very hard to get that into a story set in New York.
Yeah, that would be quite tough.
Yeah.
I was actually listening to that song at the gym this morning, and I'm like never going to listen to your music at the gym because I was like mid squat having to like stop and then like pause the song or else my knees would buckle.
That's great.
This is from Johnny. How do you tell a good story?
How do you tell a good story? How do you tell if it's a good story, or how do you tell one? I think
How do you tell one?
the best thing is you test it on people. If you can tell a story with it to a friend, and they're still interested and they haven't moved on and left or checked their phone and wandered off, then you've got a good story, I think.
Yeah, especially today, with phones and social media. That bridges nicely to the last one here we got from Ryan. Hilarious guy. He runs a massive social media account called Kind of a Big Deal. There's like two Kiwi guys. They're in Aussie and they're just crushing it. His question is, how would you approach a career and what you've done in today's age of social media?
I think I think the audience now, the way I developed a lot of my work in theatre and touring with bands and playing to audiences, that can be challenging now to get those gigs to happen. And it seems like it's harder to tour and put on shows and get people to actually show up in the room. So I think actually the audience online is perhaps your new audience to play with, and it's about connecting and seeing how they react and enjoying that, developing that response. And I think if you can at the same time work live, it'll help your work because it's more instant. It's a little hard to read likes or comments and say, well, which bit did you can't tell which bit they really connected to. You sort of can. They might mention a lyric or something, but live you can go, oh, that didn't work at all. Kill that one, or like this one's great. And actually that bit's, so some sort of combination is probably the way forward now.
Yeah. Nice. I think it's a good approach.
The other thing is, I'll just add one more thing, is that live you can make mistakes and they disappear. So it's very freeing. The pressure of playing a song live in a room that's new it's hard, but it doesn't matter if it doesn't work, if you mess it up. Whereas if you film it, there's a lot more, it feels like it's more precious, feels a little more permanent. Yeah,
true. And so something else I haven't touched on, but you're doing at the moment like a song a week for a year?
I've done it for a few weeks. I'm trying this on Instagram to write a song a week based on ideas I have or ideas that people message in with song ideas. So I return their idea into write a song as a kind of a personal challenge and just to engage with the audience. It's so far I've only done 3 and it's been 4 weeks. I don't know how long I can keep it up. I'm pretty busy. I'm failing to keep up with basic emails. So
if you need some ideas, we'll get some of the
send some. If you have ideas for songs, send me an idea and I might try and write it and sing it. It's pretty fun.
I love the TV show one. I was cracking up.
Someone sent me an idea.
Season finale.
Yeah, someone had an idea of like someone you're going out, so your partner watching the show you've been watching together, watching it without you. So that's
absolute betrayal.
It's a betrayal song. Yeah.
Relationships done. It's in the dirt.
Yeah.
It's dead. Cool. Now we'll move to some quick fire questions.
Sure.
Bret, what brings you true happiness?
I love swimming in the sea, and I love hanging out with my family when we're all getting on.
What is the meaning of life?
Ooh, meaning of life. Gee, I think it's about being sort of connected to the present moment. Yeah.
Advice you wish you knew about when you were younger?
I heard you say I was going to. I thought I had a plan for this one. Now I've forgotten. This is some advice Di Henwood had in his book. He's got this great book, and the meaning of die, the meaning of I forgot the meaning is the life of die. I think it's called his book, and he's dealing with cancer, and he said that you learn that the pain or the suffering or the challenge so if something's challenging that you're going through, things pass. That's if you know that, it's incredibly liberating. Like if you're in the middle of a real stressful moment or some disaster, you know that this is not permanent.
Yeah.
I wish I'd had that locked in earlier.
Yeah. It's really good advice. What does legacy mean to you?
Legacy means, I think it's a bit of a dangerous word with kind of in the arts, like, because I don't think it's that healthy to think about yourself too seriously like that. But I do like the idea of the things I've learned from my family and my parents, my grandparents, that carries on. You've probably got one generation where people remember you, maybe two if it's a grandparent, and then you're out, you're gone, right?
You've won an Oscar. It's pretty immortalized.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to care about that in 2 generations. But yeah, I think passing on, teaching some of those things, whether it's to your friends or your community or your children, that gives them something that helps them with their life.
If you could change one thing in New Zealand, what would this be?
I was thinking about this. I've got 3 things. Do you want 3 things?
I want 3.
The first one is I'd like New Zealanders to be more optimistic. I think sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot and we say, oh, that'll never happen to us, or I'll never do that. And I think it's really, particularly creatively, it's not that helpful. In America, this is one thing I do like of the American arts world, is that there's a real sense of, yeah, you could do that. Even if it doesn't happen. That energy means that the flow of coming up with ideas creatively is very helpful. And I think New Zealand that would be great for New Zealanders to be more like, yeah, we can do it. Let's do that. Yeah, it
does hold us back, eh? Again, it's probably like that tall poppy thing. It's like
it's something in that, isn't it? Yeah, it's similar to that. And the feeling of, oh, it'll never happen to me.
Yeah,
that's not really not helpful. And if you're creating stuff, you really need to be hopeful that it's going to work and believe in it. Even if it doesn't work, you still got to believe in it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the last one, what do you believe is the main thing that is holding back young people in New Zealand?
What's holding back young people in New Zealand? I wish there were more opportunities here, and I don't know what the solution to that is. I wish it didn't seem so integral to have to travel overseas to find success. And I don't know if that's entirely true, but it does still feel like,
I think so.
It's a little, that's the step that seems like the successful path.
Yeah. And
I would love it if we as a country could figure out a way of creating those opportunities here, and the community is supportive in its own to itself, particularly in the arts, that people can be successful in New Zealand. And
agree. I totally resonate with that one. Before we wrap up, here's a pair of sunnies from Moana Road, who's our official sponsor. Shout out Moana Road.
Oh my God, awesome.
So yeah, those are yours. And we'll finish up with a quote. It's about creativity. It's actually from Albert Einstein, which is quite interesting. Creativity is seeing what others see and thinking what no one else ever thought.